The Port of Montreal, in terms of job creation and the number of jobs that we support in and around our vicinity, it's over 600,000 jobs across Canada.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It's Warrington Ellicott back with you from the Canadian Association of Importers and Exporters. This is the Canadian edition of the Simply Trade podcast put on by our folks at the Global Training Center. Welcome, everybody. And my very special guest today is Julie Gascon. She's the president and CEO of the Port of Montreal. And bonjour and welcome to the podcast. It's so good to have you. And just a little political update for everybody. Parliament has adjourned for the summer. And so Ottawa and Montreal, for that matter, are quite empty, full of tourists, not a lot of political going on. And we all are waiting for trade to be resolved on August 1st between the United States and Canada. So we thought this would be a great time to talk to one of the key partners in the supply chains that normally folks don't recognize or even think about, and that's the ports and the value that the ports play in the transportation sector and the trade sector in general. So that's why I invited Julie to be with us today. They're great IE Canada members. And first of all, I wanted to start, Julie, you're quite the mariner. I was very surprised at your bio. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and why the sea became so important in your life? This is fascinating.
Thank you, Warrington. Actually, I joined the Canadian Coast Guard College. We have a wonderful college in Canada. It's located in Sydney, Nova Scotia. So I joined in 1994, graduated in 1998 as a mariner, as a navigator. Married an engineer, marine engineer. Normally those two crowds don't get along, but my husband is a chief engineer also with the Canadian Coast Guard. I sailed most of my career on the west coast of Canada, mostly on Canadian Coast Guard ships, and then hit like in our certification as a mariner, at one point you hit a stop, if you wish, in terms of sailing on the coast. So you have to go offshore to be able to get your Master Mariner, which I did. So I sailed on very large crude carriers. I was a Greek company, and then I sailed also for Royal Caribbean. And this allowed me to get and finalize my sea time to become a Master Mariner. So yeah, I'm a mariner by trade.
If any of the listeners need to move goods on the water, give Julie a call. She can help you out. Well, it's great. Well, we wanted to get to know the Port of Montreal. For those who are not familiar with Montreal, if you've never been, you got to go. The city of Montreal was founded in 1642. And as I looked through the history of the town, the ports played a very key role, pivotal role in the development of the community. And even to this day, if listeners visit Montreal, you'll find that the port lands, whether on the south end of town or even on the east end of town, are really part of the community, right? So maybe, Julie, you could give the listeners a little bit of a profile of the city and how the ports have played an important role.
Yeah, for sure. So the Port of Montreal will be 200 years old in 2030. So we are already in the planning for the celebration. We are the second largest port in the country. It was founded by the Chamber of Commerce of Montreal in the 1800s and has been going strong. Like if you look at ports in Canada, we're second largest in Canada. Vancouver, of course, is the largest port in the country. We're second largest. But recently, now for the second year in a row, in terms of the tonnage, the volume of tonnage, Sept-Îles is the second largest port in the country in terms of the volume. So we're so proud. There's 5 ports, 5 federal ports on the St. Lawrence and on the Saguenay. We have a collaboration agreement amongst our ports. And now we're very proud from our colleagues in Sept-Îles. But if we look at the Port of Montreal, it's really the Eastern Canada intermodal gateway. And we are particular in a way that the Port of Montreal is a balanced 50-50 export-import. This is very unusual in North America and on the East Coast of Canada and the US, where you have a port like us, which is a destination port. So the ships come in fully loaded And then they go out fully loaded with Canadian exports towards our main market, which is Europe, Southeast Asia, and now even China. So the Port of Montreal has a balanced import and export. It's very unique in North America, where vessels come in fully loaded, they fully discharge, they fully reload with exports towards Europe, Southeast Asia, our first market for export, which is India. So it's a really balanced port and it's very unique. And just to give you an order of magnitude in terms of the volume at the Port of Montreal, so it's 2,000 vessels per year, but it's 80 trains per week. It's 2,500 trucks per day. So it's a very, very busy port. We're very long, 26 kilometers on the waterfront. We also have a bulk terminal in Contrecoeur, and we'll talk later about our expansion in Contrecoeur. But it's massive. Like the Port of Montreal, in terms of job creation and the number of jobs that we support in and around our vicinity, it's over 600,000 jobs across Canada. It's $400 million worth of goods. Like it's 200 times the Olympic Stadium per year that we move in terms of cargo. And the port at any given day.
That's amazing. And you know, I don't think some people realize that you're also a gateway to the Great Lakes. And you also have a significant amount of volume doing sort of the Eastern Islands, if I'll call it, but you have services to Newfoundland, and you also have Northern Canadian service. So like there is another, well, and of course the cruise ships as well. You're a multifaceted port in that regard, right?
Okay, so in terms of what Montreal represents every day in terms of moving cargo, it's 2,000 vessels per year. It's 80 trains, like double stack trains every single week. It's 2,500 trucks every single day. And just every day as well, it's $400 million worth of goods that move through our docks. And if we look at it in terms of a year, like to try to bring the imagination into it, it's 200 Olympic Stadium per year worth of cargo that moves through the Port of Montreal. It actively supports 600,000 jobs in Canada. And then every day at the Port of Montreal, there's roughly 28,000 people that works on the port. So it's huge when you look at the economic impact of a port. It's interesting with the tariff issue and the relationship between the US and Canada these days. Like we've been doing, like Canada was a country that was really a north-south country, like in terms of the amount of export going to the US, the amount of import coming from the US into our country. But at the root of Canada, like how we built ourselves, right? From the settlers coming in, we were a maritime nation. Like we're bordered by 3 oceans. We have this massive river, the St. Lawrence, that can bring goods all the way to the doorstep of 65% of the population of Canada that resides in Quebec and Ontario, 75% of our manufacturing capacity, which is within a day to 2 days of reach of the Port of Montreal. And with this geopolitical context, ports are really now at the forefront because we are the gateway for our Canadian industry to find new market. You're just not going to go to Europe with a train or with a truck. You're just going to go to Europe with a boat. And so there's over 1 billion consumers that are covered by the free trade agreements that we have with, like, for example, all of the G7 countries that have free trade agreements with Canada. It's over $28 billion worth of market that we can tap into it. So just to give you an order of magnitude, Warrington, if Canada and our enterprise diversifies their market by a modest, really small number of 6%, our port infrastructures are full. That's it. Like we wouldn't have that capacity to support. And if exporters cannot use the Port of Montreal, the next best port to move bound cargo is a U.S. port. And when you're doing that, you lose a little bit part of your economic sovereignty, because if you can't export and import from your ports, it doesn't work, right?
Yeah, and I think I think that also too, you provide services for cruise ships. You also provide services for Newfoundland and other parts of Canada. And of course, there's a discussion about whether there's going to be a northern gateway across the Arctic because of the impacts of climate change and things like that. So I think certainly this government in Canada right now, the Carney government, is focused on trade diversification. And of course, we're going to be talking about that at our conference in November heavily. But I know that the port has got a number of expansion projects in the works, and I know this Contrecoeur terminal expansion is something that you're working on. So why don't you take us through where you are and what that investment looks like?
For sure. Just before I go down to our expansion, you're correct. We have a beautiful cruise terminal that is located in Old Montreal. Of course, there's 3 bridges to come to Montreal, so we cannot take the massive 4,000, 7,000 passenger cruise ship, but we do cater to a certain size and class of vessels that come to Montreal, and it's a beautiful place to come, and we have a thriving business there with cruise as well. In terms of our expansion project in Contrecoeur, this is years in the making. My predecessor thought of Contrecoeur before the year 2000 when they bought the land. And we've been working, I would say, heavily with the Government of Canada, with the Department of Fisheries and Ocean, with Transport Canada on ensuring we have all of our permits. We've gone through various iterations of what it will look like. And you now have a mature, shovel-ready project that could start as early as October 2025 with a delivery date of 2029. Now, you remember when I talked about that 6% diversification and how quickly Montreal can become full. The one thing you don't want as a port is not having the capacity. The ships that are calling in our port, apart, as you said, like we support almost, I think, 45 to 50% of Newfoundland's import and export with a local company here that carry all of their goods from Montreal. But all of the vessels coming into our port are international vessels. We cater to 6 major lines. Located in Geneva, in Hamburg, in Denmark, in China, in France. And so we cater to major players of the industry. Those shipping lines, when they're looking at a port, they want certainty in terms of labor. They don't want a congested port, and they want a performing port. And so that's the 3 key things to attract those lines. So if you become congested, they will look elsewhere. They don't tolerate congestion very well. It's a very fast turnaround. So Contrecoeur, before the arrival of President Trump south of the border, was an important project for the growth of Montreal, because Montreal also serviced 30% of our volume goes to Ontario. So it's extremely important for Quebec and Ontario, the prairies and other areas in Canada, but majorly for Quebec and Ontario. And Ontario is the most fast growing market. It's going to be over 1 million container more in the next 10 years. So now add to this I will say the new administration south of the border factor. You need to be ready for this capacity and to support the diversification of your enterprise. So where Contrecoeur was important, it's now critical, urgent, need to put shovel in the ground. And we have a project that not only meets all of the element of Building Canada Act in terms of a project of national significance, but that doesn't really need the acceleration measures from the Act, because we have done all the work for the last 12 years, and we've been a good partner with the Department of Fisheries and Ocean, and we are on the verge of getting our permit. So we'll be ready to put shovel in the ground in October. So it's an expansion that will be, it's the best way to counteract the U.S. tariff dialogue. It's 8,000 construction job, and that will be using Canadian steel, Canadian materials, and then it will really compete with the most modern port. Like the U.S. has invested 30 times, if you wish, the amount that we've invested in our ports, if we don't call Contrecoeur. And so they have really strong modern ports south of the border. Well, Contrecoeur will be up to par with those best ports. And we are going to build an infrastructure that is electrified, that is green, that can cater to 14,000 foot trains, double stack, and that will work really well as a synergy with, example, the Milton project. So it's a generation defining investment. That's what Contrecoeur is. It's not the Port of Montreal doing Contrecoeur. It's not, I didn't come to the Port of Montreal as an ex-public servant to build Montreal. I'm building an infrastructure for Canadian, the entire team at the Port of Montreal. That's what we're doing.
And in terms of geographic location, in terms of Montreal, where is it the Contrecoeur actually located?
It's about 30 miles. It's about 30 miles away from Montreal. So it comes in when you're coming in from the ocean, you would hit Contrecoeur first, and then Montreal is 30. It's 30 miles upriver.
And I believe that the expansion is going to be over 1 million tons, correct, of 20-foot capacity TEUs, right? So this is a major expansion of capacity, right?
Yeah, it's 1.15 million TEUs. So 1,150,000. That's phase one. And then if we carry on in the future with future phases, an additional 2.3.
Yeah, and I think, listeners, we've been talking about Canada's trade diversification strategy for a number of times here, and I think you can see that this project works very well with that. So, and of course, Canada is one of the only G7 nations with trade agreements amongst the G7, but, Canada has free trade agreements with a number of ASEAN partners now and Mercosur partners. And so you can see how this investment in this port project works seamlessly, I guess that. So I guess, Julie, how can we at the Canadian Association of Importers and Exporters help you convince Mark Carney to put a shovel in the ground and get you going? How can we help?
We're working very well with government officials. I think that the Contrecoeur project would be really like a success story for everyone. But it's hard, the government it's a new government. They're putting the procedures in place, and we have a project that is ready. So as the government is ramping up, as they are looking at all of the process to be able to put shovel in the ground, there's one project that is fully ready where the construction schedule is now. So I think that's where it's difficult, and we need a mechanism to be able to access the financing to do this project. The Port of Montreal, of course, we manage 85% of our land is Crown land, so people coming in and investing in our port are tenants. So there is a maximum in terms of capex of what they can invest, and we're working very closely. We have a really good partner for the water side with whom we have signed an agreement. The design is really mature, 90% of the design, so we know exactly our cost. We are in negotiation with an international private partner for the land side. The negotiations are going really, really well. It's a huge interest to be coming in. We need to finalize the investment and attach all of the financing. The Port of Montreal is supporting the water side through private, like our own investment and our own debt, as well as the federal that has announced 150 million, and the Quebec government also in a federal project has announced 130 million because they see the value for the province of Quebec, of course. So we're working with all levels of government. What I can tell you, Warrington, is that from my perspective as a CEO of a port, my relationship with both federal and the provincial government for this endeavor has been extraordinary. We've been working very closely with the Department of Finance, with Transport Canada, with the government of Quebec, with the Department of Fisheries and Ocean, and it's all hands on deck to get us going. But really we're ready. We just need a strong signal to go, and we're ready.
Well, that's good. I mean, our members are looking for new avenues, new markets, and we're going to talk about that in November. So let's switch gears and just talk a lot about technology. Like, I do know that some of the ports are starting to integrate AI and new technologies. And I wonder if this is happening at the port and what benefits that you're seeing in terms of efficiencies, both for the traders as well as your ops.
So in terms of both Montreal and Contrecoeur, what we are seeing is whether it's our tenants here, we have Termont and MGTP, which are our terminal operator here, Montreal Gateway Terminal and Termont. They've invested in their cranes, working on procedures to improve fluidity. The issue, if you wish, Montreal is a destination port. So when the vessel comes in, they come in for a certain amount of days. So when we are evaluated, for example, like when they classify all these ports, there's not an indicator that indicates like what a destination port, because we get the vessel out on time 100% of the time. But like if we don't turn the box, depending if the vessel arrives a bit early, a little bit late, we'll turn the box late, faster or slower, but we will come out on time because we fully unload and fully reload. And so our tenants right now are investing in electrical crane and all kinds of different things. And we're working, of course, with the MEA and with the Union of Stevedores to incorporate that into the procedure. In terms of Contrecoeur, it's a greenfield project. So it will be semi-automated on day one. It will be low carbon design. We've secured, of course, all of the electrical required for the 3 phases of the project. It will be high efficiency rail, high efficiency trucking. Jobs will be different, and we'll be working with the MEA and with the union, of course, to ensure that we can define those. And so it's going to be really interesting to see a greenfield project taking hold here in Canada, probably one of the most advanced terminal in North America. That's what we're building.
That's wonderful. I have a young millwright looking for work. So if anyone's looking for a millwright, give me a call. Yeah, give me a call. All right. Well, turning again, I guess, lastly, I just wanted to get your perspective as a port operator. What would be your sort of top recommendations for traders, the audience here today, about what should you be thinking about in terms of the port? Like what role do you play? And then, what recommendations you can make for traders to make their life simpler, your life simpler, and just the ability to move goods quicker, faster, better, smarter, that kind of thing. What would you recommend our traders think about?
So when you look at exporting to Europe, right, to go to Antwerp is less than 2 weeks. And to send a container to Belgium, it's $1,200 Canadian, roughly. Sometimes a little bit less, sometimes a bit more. People don't know necessarily how cost effective it is to export and import from Europe. But I would say, because I did announce my mid-year review this year, and diversification is here. It is here. And what we are seeing is overall our volume of containers is up 7% year to date. Our monthly container tonnage is 10% above the 2024 monthly average. Our grain volume hit record high because we had an amazing harvest 3 years in a row. Our Africa market is up 31%. Latin America is 11%. Spain more, plus 47% export. The meds, like all the med service, is plus 19% in terms of export. Is that diversification is here. And the markets is ready. You've seen Prime Minister Carney going to Europe and working deals with European countries on all kinds of different things. So I think that for traders, they need to be aware that diversification is happening. They need to support companies and industry finding new market. We are a good source of information, but our gateways, our terminals, our shipping lines are also very good sources of information. Now is the time to be more diversified. Let's face it, the U.S. will always be a critical and important partner to Canada. I think it will always be our main partner. But does it have to be 80%? Does it have to be 75%? I believe that we can go back to our roots. We need to remember who we are as Canadian with the three oceans that we have, that we are a maritime nation, that we built ourselves on trade across our ocean, and that we've got the port infrastructure to support and do it. Whether it's the expansion of Roberts Banks in Vancouver or whether it's Contrecoeur, Vancouver and Montreal are really your two export gateway for your company. Other ports are doing also export, but really like at 50% of the volume, that's really Montreal. And so we are the gateway to Europe. We are the gateway to India. We've got amazing goods. And we need to remember that. From a government's perspective, we need to look at the barriers to trade, right? And so how do we make it easier to trade with Europe? Like, for example, ships arriving, implementing the single window process, facilitating the movement of goods through ships. So we haven't necessarily reviewed all those requirements because, frankly, north-south was really the business where the business is. But if we want to go east-west, like internal barrier to trade is super important. I think that the government is working hard on this, but we also have to look as when you're using the ocean, when you're using water, what are those barrier to trade with those countries that we have free trade agreement? And let's bring those down too. That would be my recommendation.
100% agree with you. And that's going to be the focus of our discussion in Ottawa in November. So if you, I think you should come up and join us in Ottawa in the fall. It's beautiful. Well, Julie, it's been a true pleasure speaking with you today. And I know your team is ready and willing and able to talk with traders and help them expand their business as much as possible. And we really do appreciate you joining us today. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Warrington, and from the entire team at the Port of Montreal. We appreciate the time you've given us, and we're working hard for Canadians. I can tell you that.
That's great. All right, folks. Well, with that, we'll bid you a great adieu today. Cheers.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.